The early morning sun glares over the gates of Kuroyama High School. Students are moving onto campus in small groups, chatting about their summer or exchanging quick remarks about class schedules. Kenji Ito arrives alone, carrying a worn backpack and keeping his gaze lowered. He moves quietly, trying to avoid brushing shoulders with others. His eyes track the groups gathered around the courtyard, the loud laughter, the cluster of friends sharing music clips on their phones. He finds no comfort in their presence. He steps inside the school building. The hallways have lockers on either side, many plastered with stickers or doodles. He notices some of his former classmates chatting in small circles. He feels uneasy whenever they glance his way. He has endured endless bullying, subtle jabs, and snide remarks. He wants to ignore them, but a sensation of smoldering resentment lingers in his chest. He eventually reaches his homeroom and slips into a seat near the back corner, ignoring the stares of others. The popular students congregate near the front seats, discussing trends and gossip. Kenji tries to appear indifferent, but his shoulders are tense. He senses that some people are already targeting him with condescending smirks. He recognizes one face in particular, Rina Yoshida, a girl known for her magnetic social presence and tendency to pick targets to ridicule. She has tormented him before. Now she pretends not to see him, but the slight tilt of her head and the suppressed grin of her friend suggests they are aware he is there. The day's lessons begin. Teachers rotate in and out, giving lectures in mathematics, literature, and science. Kenji focuses on taking notes, keeping his eyes averted whenever Rina's circle snickers. He wonders if they are mocking him. His stomach knots with the memory of all the pranks from previous years, anonymous notes calling him weak, subtle pushes in the hallway, false rumors about his personal life. He clenches his pen. Time passes slowly until the final bell for lunch break rings. Students filter out into the cafeteria or roam the corridors. Kenji moves swiftly to avoid Rina. He grabs a simple lunch from the convenience store corner near the front of campus, heading to a secluded stairway behind the gym to eat alone. He does not expect to find Rina there. She and two friends have cut through a side entrance, and they spot him on the steps. Rina arches an eyebrow in mocking curiosity. She makes a remark that Kenji is too timid to even say hello. Her friends chuckle, eyeing him with disdain. Kenji's hands curl into fists, but he keeps them at his sides, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Rina steps forward, flicks her hair, and taps him lightly on the forehead with a single finger, an insulting gesture. She makes a light scolding sound, as though reprimanding a small child. His jaw tightens. He wants to retaliate, but he fears the consequences of causing a scene. The three girls walk away, their giggles echoing in the empty corridor. He remains on the steps, breathing heavily. His lunch is barely touched. He experiences a tightness in his chest. He resents himself for not standing up. He despises the environment that enables bullies. He hates how Rina's popularity shields her from consequences. His thoughts swirl until the break ends, and he is forced to return to class. The day slides into afternoon, and soon it is dismissal time. Kenji gathers his belongings and slips out a side exit to avoid crossing paths with Rina's clique again. Outside the main gate, he sees a group of rowdy seniors joking around. He circles past them, heading down an older commercial block with shuttered shops and dusty pavement. He chooses this route to decompress. A distant bustle from the main road seeps into the air, but the alley itself is quiet and a bit grimy. It is late afternoon, and the angled light of the sun catches something. Curiosity compels him to walk over, stepping carefully around cardboard boxes and crumpled cans. Nestled among the debris is a small pendant-like object, glowing with an odd iridescent sheen. Kenji picks it up, noticing unusual markings etched into its surface. The moment it rests in his palm, he feels a deep warmth radiate through his fingers. It reminds him of an electric current, yet it does not burn or feel unpleasant. Instead, he experiences an overwhelming sense of confidence and control. His earlier frustration dissolves, replaced by an almost euphoric certainty in himself. He glances around, making sure nobody else is present. A stray cat emerges from behind a dumpster, staring at him. Still reeling from the strange energy in his body, Kenji directs his gaze at the cat, fixating on it. Unexpectedly, the cat tenses mid-step. Its paw hangs in the air, motionless. Kenji thinks it is odd for an animal to freeze that way. Kenji tries stepping closer, and it remains locked in place. A wave of realization hits him. Somehow, he has stopped the cat from moving. Intrigued, he focuses again, imagining the cat free. Instantly, the cat bolts away, hissing in alarm. A series of rapid thoughts courses through Kenji's mind. He has never experienced anything remotely like this. He examines the glowing trinket in his hand, feeling the hum of power, as it might be a key to something unimaginable. His heart races, half in disbelief, half in excitement. Does this extend to humans too? He feels an exhilaration building. He closes his fingers around the object and decides to keep it, slipping it into his pocket before anyone sees him. That evening, he returns home to a modest two-story house. The living room is cramped, with an aging sofa and a small TV. His parents are absent. still at work, but his older sister paces around, waiting for him. She eyes him with a bored expression, asking if he managed to avoid being humiliated again at school. Her tone is dripping with condescension. Kenji's temper flares at her sarcasm, but he stays quiet, sidestepping her to head upstairs. She calls after him that he should act like a man for once. He ignores her, climbing the stairs with a scowl. In his room, he places the trinket on his desk, studying the strange symbols. He feels no moral conflict about what happened with the cat. His mind leaps to the possibility of using this new ability on the people who have tormented him. Morning arrives. Kenji tucks the trinket into his pocket and sets off for school. The day moves slowly until he spots Rina near the cafeteria. She is chatting with friends, radiating the usual smug confidence. Kenji stands just out of sight, gripping the trinket, focusing on Rina. At first, nothing seems different, so he takes a silent breath, concentrating with all his might. Rina, who is mid-sentence, abruptly goes stiff-mouthed, still slightly open. Her friends blink in surprise, tapping her shoulder. She does not respond. Kenji's pulse pounds with excitement. The freeze is real. She remains aware, her eyes shifting in panic, but her body is completely locked. He holds her like that for a few seconds, then releases her. She stumbles forward, confusion etched on her face. Her friends ask if she is feeling unwell. She rubs her arms, glancing around for something that might have caused this. She cannot pinpoint Kenji in the crowd. Kenji can hardly contain his satisfaction. He leaves quickly to avoid being spotted, a grin playing at his lips. The next day he experiments further, freezing classmates who laugh at him or ignore him in group projects. He times these incidents so that they happen when teachers are not watching closely. He notices the rumors starting. People keep mentioning that individuals are locking up without explanation. Some claim it is a medical condition spreading. Others joke about a curse. Kenji pays close attention, realizing no one suspects him yet. There is no sign of fatigue in his own body or mind. His focus never wavers, and the power seems unlimited. He decides to extend his tests in a more brazen way. In a busy corridor, he notices two classmates who once cornered him in the gym storage room to mock him in front of a camera. The memory still burns in his mind. He stands at the end of the corridor, touches the trinket, and imagines them frozen. They stop mid-laughter. He calmly walks up to them. He sees the panic in their eyes, full of helpless realization that they cannot move or speak. He lingers just long enough to relish their fear, then releases them. They gasp, stumbling back, looking around, trying to understand the cause. Kenji slips away before they can recover. He returns home with a new sense of self. He views the once threatening world as a playground for his power. His sister, clueless, tries to harass him that evening about chores. As she berates him in front of their parents, he meets her eyes and imagines her stuck mid-rant. She stops abruptly, her voice dying in her throat, arms paused in an aggressive gesture. Their parents frown in confusion, calling her name. Kenji notices her frantic eyes darting side to side. She is aware of every second, but unable to speak or move. Kenji's heartbeat quickens with a surge of pleasure, witnessing the shock on her face. A few moments later, he frees her, and she sucks in a breath, trembling. Their parents are completely baffled. Kenji walks away, stifling a smirk. That night, he replays the scene over and over in his mind, no remorse haunting him. Days progress. He refines his control, discovering that he can freeze multiple people at once if he focuses on them in a single mental sweep. He causes repeated disruptions around campus. Entire small groups lock up, unable to explain the phenomenon. Teachers grow alarmed, holding emergency meetings. The principal contacts local authorities. Students begin to suspect each other, but few suspect Kenji, who is known for being quiet and timid, rarely stirring any trouble. He ensures that he never acts in front of cameras or large adult supervision. The chaos swirls like a dark cloud around the school, fueling Kenji's pride. He focuses much of his venom on Rina, orchestrating humiliations. Sometimes he waits until she is carrying a tray of food in the cafeteria, then freezes her in front of everyone. When he releases her, she ends up dropping the tray, spilling food across the floor. Laughter erupts, and she flees in confusion and embarrassment. Another time, he catches her in the hallway on her way to an important exam, freezing her until the exam period ends, ensuring she fails. He watches from a distance as she arrives breathless and late, begging the teacher for another chance, receiving only disapproval. The rumors about her failing grades and frequent odd behavior intensify. Her friends start pulling away, unsure how to help someone who appears cursed or mentally unbalanced. But Kenji soon discovers more. One afternoon, he notices an older student rummaging through a locker. The older student had once spread rumors about Kenji's family life. Kenji decides to freeze him, stepping closer to examine his reaction. He sees the student's pupils quiver. In that moment, Kenji feels an impulse to do more than just hold him. He wonders if the freeze extends to direct commands. Tentatively, Kenji focuses on a single thought. He wants the older student to shut the locker. He pictures it clearly, pushes the command outward in his mind. To his shock, the older student, still frozen, seems to move only his arm, closes the locker door, then returns to a stiff, partially suspended posture. Kenji's eyes widen. He had not released the freeze. He forced the older student to obey an action mid-freeze. This revelation triggers a new wave of excitement. He releases the older student fully, then slips away, leaving the other boy disoriented. This suggests a new layer of control. Kenji can not only stop people from moving, he can also force them to perform specific acts while in that state. That evening, Kenji is restless, imagining the endless possibilities. He heads to a deserted intersection near his home, waiting until he finds a stray passerby. He tests this command ability again, freezing the person in an alley, then forcing them to pick up an empty can and throw it into the trash. The experience sends shivers of pleasure through him. He is forging actual puppets out of living beings. No one else is around to see the act. Emboldened, Kenji decides to escalate his manipulation at school. He first targets a teacher who has always dismissed his concerns about bullying. During a free period, Kenji intercepts this teacher in an empty corridor. He freezes her, stepping close, feeling a pitiless satisfaction. He then commands her to kneel on the floor and place her forehead against the ground in a gesture of total submission. She obeys mechanically, her eyes flooded with horror. The moment she completes the action, Kenji releases her. She scrambles up, confused, tears forming as she struggles to rationalize why she behaved that way. Kenji stays behind a corner, listening to her frightened muttering. He walks away, deeply satisfied. He carries this mindset through the following days, systematically targeting those who once mocked him. Students who teased him are made to do humiliating acts in front of their peers, though no one can quite piece together why they are suddenly kneeling. Some suspect blackouts or mass hysteria. Kenji sees only a swirl of confusion that delights him. At home, he refines his power on his sister, pushing her to do menial tasks mid-freeze. He forces her to take out the trash or kneel and scrub the kitchen floor at odd hours. When he releases her, she often breaks down crying, pleading for some explanation that he never provides. Their parents were not at home, though they notice tension in the household. Kenji's sister grows more terrified and avoids him, but he keeps an eye on her, ensuring she will not expose him. One evening, she tries to confront him, speaking in a trembling voice about how strange incidents keep happening in the house. She threatens to tell their parents everything. Before she can finish, Kenji freezes her in the living room, forcing her arms to her sides. He steps up to her, letting her see the cold glint in his eyes. Then, using this new command ability, he makes her drop to her knees, bow her head, and remain like that for several minutes. He imagines the crushing humiliation she feels. When he finally lets her move again, she collapses, gasping. He calmly reminds her with his glare that he can do far worse if she does not remain silent. She retreats, tears on her cheeks, fear etched deep in her expression. At school, Rina's downfall continues, but now Kenji adds an extra layer of cruelty, forcing her to degrade herself. When he finds her alone, he freezes her, then commands her to throw her phone to the ground and smash it underfoot. She stares in horror as her body moves against her will. He watches her tears pool, but he relishes the scene. He humiliates her by making her toss her makeup in the trash or bow to random classmates in corridors. No one understands her bizarre behavior, and many conclude she has become unhinged. She loses every trace of the pride that once defined her. Kenji revels in the power reversal. Word spreads among the student body that Rina might be under some evil spell, and teachers panic over the rash of incidents. Kenji's name never once surfaces as a suspect, due to his quiet reputation. A few days later, the school arranges an assembly in the auditorium, inviting parents and local officials to discuss the crisis. The principal addresses the crowd, voicing concern and urging calm. Rina waits near the front, expression grim. Kenji stands at the back, arms folded, scanning the scene. He sees teachers looking around nervously. Parents whisper among themselves. A hush falls over the crowd when the principal mentions that any students with information should come forward immediately. Rina stands up, trembling, but determined. She moves toward the stage, ignoring a teacher's protest that she should remain seated. She reaches the microphone, glances at the sea of students, her eyes flickering with fear. Kenji narrows his gaze from the back. He suspects she might attempt to name him, even though she has no concrete evidence. He prepares to freeze her. However, a stronger thrill courses through him at the thought of humiliating her in front of hundreds. He focuses, locking her in place as she tries to speak. The entire crowd notices her pause, waiting for words that never come. Kenji steps forward slowly along the side aisle, intensifying the freeze on Rina. She stands stiff, mouth open, microphone inches from her lips, but no sound emerges. Then Kenji commands her to perform a humiliating gesture. He orders her to kneel on the stage, bow her head repeatedly, as though in abject apology. Her legs bend and her body lowers. The entire audience gasps, some crying out in alarm, unsure whether she is having a breakdown. Others look around, demanding someone do something. Teachers rush toward the stage, but Kenji extends the freeze to them, halting them mid-run. Dozens of teachers and officials freeze in place, arms extended, eyes wide. Kenji experiences a euphoric surge. More parents stand, some demanding answers. Kenji smirks. For a final blow, he forces Rina to tear the microphone from its stand and throw it across the floor. The clang reverberates through the auditorium. He then releases everyone at once, causing a chaotic uproar. Rina falls sideways, sobbing. Teachers stumble forward, parents cry out, and the principal rushes to the stage, shouting instructions. Kenji leaves the school auditorium amid the echoing screams and confusion he has orchestrated. Kenji's heart still thumps with excitement. He crosses the courtyard. Dozens of students huddle in anxious clusters, whispering about the strange phenomenon that has plagued the campus. Some glance at Kenji and quickly turn their faces away, as though sensing he is behind their nightmares. He drinks in the fear like a potent fuel. He passes through the school gates and continues down the sidewalk, ignoring cars and bicycles streaming by on the road. He decides not to go home immediately, wanting a bigger stage for his power. He heads for the train station, weaving between office workers and students heading home. The station building looms large, full of bustling foot traffic. On any other day, a throng of citygoers might intimidate him, but now, the presence of crowds only sparks his ambition. He buys a ticket from a vending machine, boards the next train, and finds a seat near the door. Commuters fill every available space. Kenji closes his eyes momentarily, sensing how easy it would be to freeze the entire carriage. He holds back to avoid drawing immediate attention. Instead, he waits, formulating a larger demonstration. Kenji stands at the corner, scanning the area. A wave of exhilaration rolls through him as he imagines halting every single person mid-stride. The suited office workers, the delivery riders, the groups of friends heading to dinner. The possibilities for shameful acts multiply in his mind. From mild inconvenience to outright devastation, he draws a slow breath, stepping forward into the crosswalk as the signal changes. Kenji feels the hum of the trinket in his pocket, a comforting warmth that has accompanied him since he first discovered it. He stands by the fountain, glancing around for any police presence or city cameras that might cause trouble. Even if cameras record him, it won't matter if he can freeze the entire block. He closes his eyes for an instant, summoning the freeze, and instantly, the musician's guitar strum cuts off mid-chord. People around the fountain halt. A father lifting his child into the air pauses. The child's eyes dart around in confusion. A cluster of high schoolers freeze mid-laugh, drinks in their hands. Kenji's chest swells with delight. He steps forward, weaving between the silent mannequins. He spots a woman in her 20s inching slowly backward, apparently not fully locked by the freeze. He guesses she was outside his direct radius when he initiated it, so she retains partial freedom of movement. Her eyes are wide, tears forming. She trips, falls to the ground, and tries to crawl away. Kenji narrows his gaze, intensifying the freeze specifically on her. She goes rigid, lying flat with one arm stretched out. He steps away, leaving her pinned to the cement. A distant siren echoes through the streets. The police have been alerted far quicker than he anticipated. He scans the perimeter for an escape route, but then reminds himself that he can freeze any officer who arrives. He decides to remain and push the demonstration even further. 2 patrol cars screech to a halt at the edge of the plaza. Doors fly open. Several officers step out, assessing the bizarre scene. Dozens, possibly hundreds, of people locked in unnatural poses or forcibly performing humiliating acts. With a mental flourish, he freezes the first pair of officers as they run forward. They drop mid-step, arms extended, baffled. Moments later, he hears additional sirens approaching. Police vans block nearby intersections, forming a perimeter. Kenji sees uniformed shapes hustling into position, likely aiming to cordon off the entire block. They do not understand that ordinary tactics are worthless against an enemy who can lock them in place. Kenji contemplates letting them gather, freezing them all at once to create the largest audience for his power yet. In the midst of orchestrating this large-scale freeze, Kenji notices a slight throbbing in his temples. He has never held so many minds under his dominion at once. The trinket in his pocket burns hot against his thigh, more than it ever has before. He tries to ignore the discomfort, rationalizing that the artifact is simply straining with the intensity of these commands. He steels himself and tightens his focus, determined to show no weakness. A flicker of movement draws his attention. In the far corner of the plaza, beyond the barricade trucks, his sister emerges from a side street. She stands behind a line of paralyzed onlookers. Her face is ashen, and she clutches her phone with trembling fingers. Kenji's stomach tightens with anger. He knows she has lived in terror of him at home, but her presence here suggests she has been following him or trying to gather proof of his atrocities. She raises her phone slightly, as though filming or capturing evidence. Kenji's eyes narrow. He refuses to let her sabotage him. He surges forward mentally, attempting to freeze her, but she is standing just out of full range. She flinches backward, stepping behind a frozen man. She is clearly terrified, but desperation drives her to keep the camera aimed. Kenji's head throbs painfully. He steps through a sea of motionless bodies, the strain of holding so many people under his freeze gnawing at his concentration. He narrows his gaze, intensifying the push toward his sister. She stiffens for a fraction of a second, then jerks free, stumbling backward.